Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. Learn from their experiences and navigate the highs and lows of the investing world. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. So happy that you're here with us today. I'm really excited because my friend Josh Culler was with us. Josh and I have been, I've been fortunate enough to become friends with him over the last few years. We happen to be in the same mastermind where a lot of really cool people are doing high levels of operation within the real estate investing space. But Josh is the owner of Cullen Media, and he's a real estate investing content marketing expert. And I wanted to have him on with us because so many people in this space are thinking about, creating content, whether it's posting on social media or it's more intentional, like a podcast, or you're recording videos to generate leads. And Josh is an expert in that. And he's going to have a ton of advice, and he's got some really cool things happening in his business. And I wanted to have him on as a guest so he could share what's working for him, and hopefully that will help you with your business as well. So Josh, thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate you taking out the time.
Yeah, Benson, thanks for having me on. I had you on my podcast a long time ago, which thinking about starting back up at some point, but you were one of my last guests on the show, and that was a lot of fun. I think that was our first time meeting, and then we've definitely had some conversations between now and then, and that's been a couple of years now. So glad you got the podcast going. So I'm excited about that, first of all. So congratulations, and happy to be a guest here.
So are you telling me that I ruined your podcast?
You did not ruin my podcast. You weren't the last guest.
But
you
I
were one of the last
I set
guests.
It burning, right? And somebody else just knocked it down.
Yeah, I'm gonna be starting it back up though, so they'll have like one of the more recent episodes will be yours. So new listeners will go to your episode. So
Yeah, well, I'm happy to know that I didn't ruin it. So I'm sure there was other circumstances involved, but yeah, like, so we're in this really cool space, with the people from the family mastermind, and we get to talk to a lot of, people that are just making stuff happen. And, you're really young, man. I mean, I don't know if you want to share that, but like, you are such a young operator. You've accomplished so many things at a young age. And just before we got on, you said that you're a good podcast guest, and I believe that's true. And you were recently on Flip Talk with Don Costa, and you mentioned that when you were 21, you started out doing virtual wholesale, and that you realized that you just didn't like real estate. What aspects of the real estate game just didn't quite click with you?
that's a really good question. Yeah. So what's funny about that is myself and those of you who are listening, if you know the name Gary Harper, I was actually working for him. So he's the big systems and operations person within our industry, the real estate investing space. Just about anybody that's in the real estate investing space should know his name, Sharper Business Solutions. But I was working with him, and he was partners with a couple other guys that were they own a wholesaling company out here in the Midwest. And I just realized like quickly, because a lot of what I was doing, even before I started working with him, I was working with a direct competitor to their organization in the area that we're in, which is Northwest Indiana, right outside Chicago. And at that time, I was like 19, going on 20 years old. And I was doing pre-looks, going at houses and, walking through with the cameras and everything. And that was way back in the day where it was such a different landscape. We're talking like 2014, 15-ish, time period. So acquisitions was just a totally different ball game. It was like it was placing, bids on HUD and bids on the, MLS and auction and auction.com and all of those. Whereas most of the work that went into wholesaling was acquiring buyers more than anything. Getting the deals was easy. The buyers was the hard part. So a lot of what I was doing at the time when I first started in the industry was doing pre-looks, going out to houses, driving around, putting bandit signs out and that sort of thing, taking pictures. So it was a lot of that. And then when I started working with Gary, we were actually wholesaling in Michigan and then Ohio at some point later on down the road. We added that on. And we did, I believe, just over 70 deals the first year that he and I were together. We kind of ran that state, whereas the rest of the organization and the wholesaling company was running, Indiana and Illinois. And so he and I ran that. We had a couple of guys that would go out to Michigan, stay the entire week out there and pre-look a bunch of houses that we were looking to get under contract and whatnot. And he and I actually both just realized we just didn't really like the actual like the piece of real estate on that. So I mean, you even look at his business today, even though he's still and don't get me wrong, I love the industry. I love the people in the industry as well. It's just the real estate part of it. I'm just, it's not that I'm throwing my hands up and saying don't do it. Like obviously, you need to do it. There's still certain
Right.
parts of real estate that I, private lending and that sort of thing that I am a part of. But even if you look at like Gary, he does, and he may own a few rentals or whatever. He probably does some private lending, but for the most part, his active business is implementing systems and processes, that sort of thing. So he and I were kind of in the same boat with that. So the reason why I'm not saying that we invented virtual wholesaling, but there was no trainings out there on it. We just discovered like we could do everything that we need to do inside the office, just send somebody out once a week for
Hmm.
4 or 5 days and have them pre-look the houses, take pictures, put up bandit signs, that sort of thing. And we figured out how to do everything from our, our office that we were in. And that was kind of the sum of it. So
Yeah, virtual wholesaling is now the chic thing to do.
yeah,
I think COVID was one of the big kind of forcing factors for that.
did.
When
Yeah.
they got comfortable with, operating on Zoom, and then there was like that whole thing of like virtual workplace and
Yeah.
working from home. And so that trend did help virtual wholesaling become more popular. And,
Yep.
it's kind of, everyone is talking about it now, but not a whole lot of people are being successful at it because there's just so many
Yeah.
moving parts.
Yep.
But
You
with
really
that
have to
said,
know communication extremely well because it's part
mhm,
of the deal is the handshaking function of it. And I'm not going to get because I'm not an expert in sales and that sort of thing in acquisitions, but part of the the hurdle that we had to jump into even back then was not meeting face to face with these sellers. And at the time, Zoom was around, but it wasn't what it was today.
right.
And so like we would and you really didn't have you had FaceTime, but today everybody has iPhones, but back then not a lot of people did. And I say back then like it was forever ago, but it was close to 10 years
Times
ago
change
now. So
fast.
and
I
it's
mean,
changed
literally
fast.
fast.
The acceleration of the change has been like pretty drastic. So we spent a lot of time on phone calls, a lot of time like talking to the sellers and that sort of thing, and just being, transparent with them, wholehearted, that sort of thing. And if, they
Mhm.
ever wanted to meet up, we had a couple times where a deal was really juicy and the seller really wanted to meet us face to face just to know we weren't like a scam or anything. So we drove out 2.5 hours to go meet the person at a McDonald's and sat down with them, signed the contract right then and there. So it was just a
Yeah.
very connective time. And, I think that that's missing obviously in the world of virtual deals. So
It is. It is. But there's so many positives to virtual because most
yeah,
people don't live in markets that are conducive to like
yeah,
viable deals.
yep,
And so they
yep.
just bang their head against the wall and they're doing the right things. Like if they did those things in a completely different market, it would probably work.
Oh yeah,
But they're doing the right things in the wrong market, expecting to get a better outcome and they're just not getting it. So that's
yep,
why virtual is such a valuable piece of people's business these days is like the ones that are in crappy markets can actually succeed in markets that are remote or
yeah,
virtual.
of course, absolutely.
So the your experience with Gary didn't ruin you for real estate because you still operated it in the content creation and the lead generation aspects of it, but you actually fixed and flipped too, didn't you?
I did one deal and I never did one again.
What
I
happened
think
there?
I was 21 and it
Yeah,
is a disaster. I broke even. Luckily I didn't lose money, but I broke even. So yeah, but out inexperienced, I wasn't really like getting help from anybody at the time. So I just,
right. But it
yeah,
was enough for you to be like, all right, just don't want to do that again.
yeah, yeah. Now, if the, times changed and I wanted to get back into it, I have enough resources, connections, and people to be able to kind of walk me through things if I needed to. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
that was a one and done.
That's a challenge, it's like the biggest challenge for most people with that is dealing with contractors and getting reliable work and getting
Yeah.
people to execute and do what they say they're going to do and be on time and on budget. And it's really challenging. I mean, people
Mhm.
take it too lightly. I think that's been glamorized by the fix and flip shows and it looks so fun and easy, but
Yeah.
the reality is that most people just don't succeed at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So did you put some of those experiences in the book that you wrote, with the things not taught in school that every young person needs to know, the first 25, right? Are those experiences in that book that you wrote when you were 25
Oh,
years old?
oh wow. Yeah, that's been 5 years now since I wrote that book. And what's funny is I still get feedback from people on that. Like you just brought it up and I haven't even thought about that book in a long time. But yeah, I mean like, and I still from time to time go back into it and look at things that like, I was talking about this when I was like 25, 5 years ago, and I've kind of forgotten about those, principles that I lived on and that sort of thing that helped me kind of catapult to where I was. And at that time, I wasn't even full time into my own business. At that time, when I wrote the book, I was actually working a full time job still in the real estate investing space, running a real estate mastermind at the time. But yeah, definitely a lot of like what I wanted to pass on in that book was to younger people because I was at the time also running a mastermind for high schoolers as well. And I thought that was going to be a really good leverage point to be able to, kind of get to the youth. And it did a lot. Like I still have, I said they were high school then. Now they're, 22, 23, 24, that read my book and they still come up to me today. Like, you have no idea like how awesome that book was. So, that's
That's
kind
so
of cool,
cool.
but yeah.
Because a lot of people wait until like they think they know it all before they go and write a book,
I was just
right?
documenting my journey. Yeah, I was just
Right.
up until what I learned, because I had been in and around some highly successful people for, between the ages of 19 and 25. And I'm like, I've learned a lot. And I've grown a whole lot in mindset and the way my work ethic is, and just so much about what I know as a whole when it comes to like wealth building, legacy building, that kind of thing. And I just wanted to pass along what I had learned at that current point, understanding and knowing, which I even stated in the book at some point, that this is just the beginning. Like there's so much
Right.
more to come that I don't even know about yet. And I was right. 5 years later after it, like there's so much in the last 5 years that I've learned that I could write three more books if I needed to. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to pass along what I had already learned. So
And I think that's an important thing to do, or at least for people to document, because if you'd waited till you were 50, right? And you're rich and famous at that point, right? And everybody knows you. Like all that stuff that had been learned up to the point of 25 probably wouldn't be written about it, or it would be
yeah.
overshadowed with all the stuff after it.
Hmm.
So like the fact that you took the time to really document it at that point where it was still relevant and you could really highlight the things that were important to you at that time in your life, and it resonates with younger people, right? If you
Yeah.
waited, then you probably wouldn't write the same thing. It would be a different story
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is so I don't know if do you remember the presentation Max Tucker gave at Family Mastermind one time, that he's done multiple New York Times bestsellers. Matt got him on the stage to speak. I'm not sure if you remember him, but he
I
was
I
there.
don't.
He was there at one point. I think it was about a year and a half to 2 years ago on the stage, and he was giving a presentation. So he's a big New York Times bestseller, best-selling author, and he gave some presentations on writing books because that was kind of the thing that people were going through at the time. And one of the examples he used, I had actually heard when I was 24, 25. I don't think it was from him, it was from somebody else, but he used kind of the same example, is that when you look at like the ascension ladder of, somebody growing in mindset, growing in business, growing in whatever it is that they're doing, a lot of times an author or somebody that potentially wants to write a book, they think to themselves like, I'm not qualified enough to write a book on this because maybe I consider myself an expert in these areas, but a lot of other people wouldn't consider me an expert. But the reality is that you have levels to everything in life, right? So if there are, say for instance, I want to write a book on how to grow a media organization. Well, there's plenty of other people that are highly more qualified out there to do that as opposed to me. So they may be able to write a book for people that are at this level, but those who actually want to start growing it are way down here, and the information could or could not be contextual. But
Right.
say I'm right here, kind of halfway, my content, my information could be a lot more relatable to the person that's just getting started as opposed to the person that's already grown it 10 times the size of my organization. So there's levels to it. So it's like, if I have people that if I'm my growth wise, I'm past a certain point, I can write the book for the people underneath me at that point.
Right.
And I don't necessarily have to worry about the people that are, above me. And truth be told, too, I mean, after I came out with the book, 5 years ago, I had people that were much more successful than I was even at the time, and even now. that came up to me and like, I read your book, man. That thing was great. I learned so much out of that. I'm like, you're way like light years ahead of me. How did you learn anything from me? So there's so much truth to that. You know, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I think too a lot we have seasons in our lives too that aren't necessarily related to how old we are, the ups and downs of life. And you talked about how it was for younger people, thinking that younger people would have less experiences, but there are lots of older people too that
Yeah.
where they're having those experiences when they're 40 and 50.
Right.
And so
Right.
age does play a factor, but it isn't necessarily the biggest one.
Yeah.
And in that book, and I haven't read it yet, to be totally upfront with everybody, but you talk about like the journey of happiness and creation, and really kind of just being the in control of your own life, and accomplishing goals, and chasing your passions. I believe that's relevant for anybody,
Mhm.
regardless of age. And it doesn't surprise me at all that people who are much more successful and older than you read it
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
at all. I mean, but that led to other books, right? So now you've got other publications. You got the REI marketing book.
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting thing that I tested out in the market. And it was like in retrospect, it was a pretty successful experiment that I was going after. So maybe at some point we'll talk about this, but the main thing I'm an expert in at the moment is content creation. So it's, primarily what we do is so full social media management, full podcast management, full YouTube management. But in the world of content, there's so many things that could come out of just about anything that you produce on a content basis. So the experiment was, and it wasn't something I invented. I got it from Tim Ferriss, and I think Gary Vaynerchuk had done this with one of his books at some point. But it was basically I had the podcast, the REI Marketing Weekly. That's the one that I'm going to be starting back up here within the next couple months or so. And that's the one that Benson was on. But the REI Marketing Weekly is a weekly podcast about marketing in the real estate investing space. And what I wanted to do as a lead hook, because obviously, like when you're trying to generate leads for your business, you at some point want to create a lead hook, which is a lead magnet, something that's either physical or it's a downloadable contract or something like that that you can send leads in order to collect their information and then remarket to them down the road. And so I wanted to test this for future clientele, to be able to kind of open this up as a service. So what I did was I took at the time, I think when I launched the book, I had put out and published about 52 to 55 episodes, somewhere in there. And what I did was I took those first, I think that the book ended up being the first 52 episodes. And I took those episodes, got them all completely transcribed, and then had a writer. So it's kind of like three stages to the writing. So there's a transcription, and then I had a writer go and clean up all the transcriptions and make sure that it was like readable. Because when you speak and directly transcribe that speech, it's not going to be readable format. So I had a writer go in and reformat all that to be basically, something that you could actually read on paper. And then the second writer came in and kind of like built all of the content around specific topics. So one chapter might be about John Martinez talking about, how to talk to motivated seller leads. And then the next chapter would be specifically on marketing. And then it's, this person talking about this topic. And it was just kind of like going down. Each guest had specific things that we were going to write as like chapters and kind of sections of chapters, and then put it out that way. And then the third writer kind of like contextualized everything to actually be a book format. So in the entirety of the book, I think it ended up being just over a couple hundred pages. The only thing I actually wrote was the introduction. I wrote a couple of paragraphs inside of some of the chapters because I wanted to give my input on what was written there. And then I believe I wrote the dedication page, and that was it. So in the entire book, that's all I actually wrote. And then I had writers go in and basically contextualize everything. We did all the asset creation, so building out the cover and stuff like that. But I was able to get, I think, pre-order wise, I was able to get over 750 pre-orders just on the book. And then another a few hundred orders came in over the course of the next year or so. I still get orders today. from that book. And that was like, that's a really good truth and like utilizing content for other purposes. And that was what we did. And then we did it for several other clients afterwards. And it's a great lead magnet because you're mailing that book to somebody physically. And even if you approach it correctly, one of the things we found out, so we printed off books, got them from Amazon because we published it through Amazon, self-published, which was highly efficient to do and cheap. But we got the books in, and then when an order comes in, we'd ship it back out with a little card in it with some call to actions and promotions inside of it and that sort of thing, and then ship it out to the person that bought it. And then later, what we ended up doing was we put that promotion already inside the book, like published on a page, on a one pager,
Mm-hmm.
and almost like a magazine. And then we would have people go to Amazon. We would have them fill out a form and it would directly link them back to the Amazon page. So we would still get their information, their email, phone, name, and all that address. And then they would go to Amazon. They would place the order on Amazon. And then from there, Amazon would print the book on demand, ship it out to them, and we wouldn't have to touch the book or packaging or anything like that. So over time, we kind of got like a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more processed out, and found out some better routes to take. So that was kind of like the nutshell of building that out, which is, just being more efficient with content. So,
Oh yeah. Like I haven't heard of anybody doing anything like that when it comes to content marketing. Like you just took it to a completely different level,
yeah.
and you didn't waste anything. Like it was all in there.
Mhm.
So when you say like, because I say you wrote a book, do you say I wrote a book, or do you say like I published the book, or what's the word that you use?
Yeah, I would just say I published a book. It's all branded and everything. So
Yeah.
basically, it's just, it's a paperback book. It has my name on it because I'm kind of the one who facilitated the authoring of it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, I still kind of like structured a lot of the book on my own as well, but my writers did the majority of the work. So it's no different than somebody ghostwriting for you. You might have the ghostwriter's name inside the book, but it's authored by Benson. Like that's
Right.
like, even if you have a ghostwriter behind you. So I was still the author of the book, which is totally fine. Nobody's going to combat that. But then I have
Yeah.
contributors. So inside one of the first pages is all my contributors, and it has the list of names that were all inside the book at some point. So
I think it's brilliant. And do you plan on doing anything like that again with that kind of that
yeah,
same structure?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think I have another, since we published that book, there's probably another like 50 to 70 episodes that we've published that could definitely be written back into a book. And then of course we're still we haven't done it for somebody in maybe like a year or so, but we're still kind of offering that as a service. Like we'll still do that for people. It's not something I've
Mm.
aggressively pushed. There's a lot of logistics that go into it, especially when you're working with a client. Like when it's me doing it and I'm writing the book myself, I could if I wanted to, like aggressively wanted to, I gotta have like literally hop off this podcast right now and have a book in Benson's hands, a brand new book in Benson's hands in less than 2 weeks. Like I could speed the timeline up that fast, and it'd
Wow.
be a 250-page book. So, but when you're working with a client, like a specific client, a lot of it's reliant on them helping build the content out and improve things, that sort of thing. And the timelines could be like 6 to 12 months to write a book. But we've done it in as little as like a month for a client, like have an actual like,
Wow.
and I think their book was about 275 pages. So it's a great strategy. It's highly efficient. It's a lot
Oh
more
yeah.
affordable than writing your own book and then publishing it with a publisher. Plus you're using it as a lead magnet. It's a marketing piece. So it's good all the way
That's really
around.
cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just like one example of your creative mind when it comes to taking content and repurposing it for, real estate investing. Um, Tell us kind of like what do you guys do? What's the core of your business? You talked about, podcasts, you talked about social media. Um, Maybe just describe what it is that Cullen Media does.
Yeah, so the three core things that we do are full, and this is full management of everything. It's podcast, YouTube, and social media. So when I say full management, basically like I come in kind of as the client's content director and give them guidance on everything that they need. And the first thing that I always do with the client is I hop on an onboarding call, but it's treated a lot more like a strategy call. Because the reality is what a lot of people will do is say like, I know I need social media because I went to a mastermind and everybody, and when I was on my hot seat, everybody told me I needed to put out social media videos. I don't really know what I'm doing though, so I'm just going to put stuff out. That's the entrepreneur mindset. Is like, I'm just going to do it, which is cool. Do it. But what happens when you just do it with organic social, because it doesn't generate results immediately off the bat, because real estate investors in the community, what I found is like they're used to sending out direct mailers and having an expectation that I'm gonna get X amount of calls, X amount of deals out of that, and X amount of money in my bank account. And that's kind of like the way real estate investors chalk things up. Now, over the past couple of years, it's kind of gotten better because they understand in the world of content marketing, and especially if you're not going to run paid advertising behind it, it's going to be so much different. But the way that we kind of operate is basically, we work with clients. I'm your content director as you be my client. And whether it's we're only doing social media management for you, we're only doing podcast management for you, YouTube, or all three of them, or just two of them, whatever it is, we handle literally everything from top down. The only thing that the client's responsible for is recording the content, but that's also off the back of my direction and my kind of like facilitation. So when you say recording content, a lot of times people will buckle down and be like, well, I didn't want to record anything in the first place. But I make it as easy as possible for you to get content recorded. Because the reality is, like, in the day and age where, we talked about like how COVID kind of shifted the mentality of like virtual wholesaling, it also did the same thing to content creation, where between 2020 to like 2022, you saw an infinite amount of video content going out, and like 90% of it was trash because people were using webcams on their laptops to record content through Zoom and that sort of thing. You're not always going to get the best, quality and the best looks and stuff like that. Not that that's the only thing that it's about, but it's a big piece of it now at this point. So what you'll find at this point is people that stick out in the social media world or stick out in the YouTube world. They, not that they have the best quality like appearance, but that is a piece that does set people apart. And it's like, listen, you don't have to be, going out to build a $20,000 recording studio in your office, or hire somebody and pay them $5,000 a day to come record video. Obviously, that's a path that you can take, and it is a very easy way to get it done. But even if you don't have the pockets to be able to do that, there's so many easy ways to be able to record content from your phone, from a camera. That's like, cameras nowadays are so easy to use, point and shoots or whatever it is. You don't have to have, 5 different lenses, that sort of thing. Make sure you have good audio. And even with that, there's audio enhancers that, we have with AI tools now that can really enhance audio to make it sound crystal clear. So there's just so much that kind of goes into that, but that's what we do, is the full management of all that stuff. And we do specifically work with real estate investors, folks that are in this space. Once again, like, I think that there's just a different mentality in this industry. I've tried to branch out in other industries, and it's just doesn't translate the same way. I don't know what it is, because the principles of what we do, if you have a donut shop, it would work the exact same way, right? So like, but it's a different world. And obviously a lot of real estate investors have deeper pockets. We are a premium price service, but it's because we're handling literally everything for you. So if the type of client that we work with is somebody that wants to hand it off, not dismiss themselves completely, but just know that all their content's going out on a daily basis, twice a day basis, and their podcast's going out once a week, and there's no issues with it or anything like that, that's the client that we work with. We still want you involved, not like daily, but we want to have, check-ins with you and stuff like that. But the type of client I do not work well with is somebody that's constantly managing us, because why use me in the first place? We're here so that, because we're the professionals, so that you don't have to be. And that's kind of the objective there. So that's honestly what it is. We do work with like mostly influencers and people that have coaching programs and stuff like that. But we do also service active real estate investors too, because even active real estate investors need content as well. They need videos going out that is very contextual to, what a motivated seller lead is, asking about, and that sort of thing. And we work with them as well on that kind of stuff. So that's the nutshell.
I've always wondered how content creation for a real estate investor translates to actually getting leads coming in. Right.
Great question.
Is it more like JV type deals? Like another investor heard that and they're like, yeah, I want a JV with them. They have something I don't. They have the resources, they've got the buyers list, they've got, money, or, they've got the stuff that's difficult to get for a newbie already in place. So I'll JV. Or is it both? Is it like the person who's in foreclosure hears the podcast and is like, oh, I want to sell my house to this person?
Yeah. Okay, so fantastic question. This is going to be a banger for you because there's it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of grit to it when it comes to like the marketing piece of social media. Because that's always my thing is people love to detach social media from their overall marketing plan for whatever reason. So they're like continually looking to get new views and subscribers and stuff like that. But if you don't have leads coming through the door, then you need to be aggressively working for that because you're spending money on this marketing. And there's a stage of it where it's like you need to build awareness and credibility and that sort of thing. But at some point, it needs to start bringing leads to the door.
Right.
So the way I kind of approach this is your target demographic. What are they looking for? So there's two totally different demographics. So if I'm an active real estate investor and I'm looking to make connections with other wholesalers, realtors, or people that are in my market that could potentially bring me deals, then the type of content I'm putting out there is teaching them how to bring me good deals. Like, what am I looking for? Giving them case studies and pushing out testimonials and saying like we helped Roberta with this house because this happened to her and that sort of thing. It's also like what makes a good deal to me as a real estate investor, and then you put a piece of content out that way. That sort of thing can attract people in your network all day long to bring you deals. So that's one way. The other way is if you're, and I think it's twofold. So you should be doing both. But the reality is a wholesaler or a realtor, even those two are completely different demographics. Sometimes they're one and the same, but that's not often. But especially between those demographics and then the demographic of a motivated seller, they're two completely different personalities. You have to market that to them completely different. So the way you would approach a motivated seller lead with content is you're not going to be putting out like daily social to them. You could be just to stay in front of them, just to be there when they are motivated to sell you that house. But the biggest focus with that is literally just answering questions that your motivated seller lead would have. And you're using that content as SEO purpose. Typically, you're going to put it on YouTube because that's a search platform. You're going to link it to your website so that helps, build SEO on your website for the leads. I would also put those on your socials because people still today will probably go look for that as well. But you're just marketing to them totally different. So you're not going to have a podcast for motivated seller leads because they're not going to come back on a weekly basis to listen to your podcast. They don't care about that. They just
Right.
want to know the answer to a question that they have. So if they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning because Aunt Ruth just passed away and they inherited a house, they're up at 2 o'clock in the morning dealing with the situation. They're going to Google, what do I do with this house? I don't even know what to do. And your video pops up at the right moment in time that tells them, and it's Benson's face showing up saying what to do if you just inherited a house in Chicago. And then they watch the video, they get the answer question. Now that's a lead that comes to your door that's primed and ready because you just delivered value to them. But motivated sellers, regardless of us liking referrals and that sort of thing, it's a very transactional relationship. So
Yeah.
typically, once a seller sells you the house, you're never going to hear from them again, right? There's that one occasion, one in 100, that they bring somebody else to sell a house to you, but that's not often. So the goal of the content at that point would be to just address a question that they have right there. And then I know a lot of people that also use video content for lead follow-up. So it's like sending emails or texts with the video inside of it that answers specific questions
Mm.
according to their motivation. And you have to contextualize it, right? So if you send a tired landlord video, like what do you do if you don't want to deal with tenants and toilets and you send that to somebody that just if you send it to a probate lead, it's not going to they're two
Right.
different demographics, so it's got to be contextual. But then on the flip side, again, like good friends of mine down in Indianapolis, Brian Snyder, he has a podcast specifically for Indianapolis wholesalers, basically teaching them how to get good deals. And a very large majority of their leads for deals come from other wholesalers and realtors because they
Mm.
come through the podcast. He's delivering value to them. So they are going out to find good deals and not bringing them garbage because Brian basically told them how to do it on the podcast. And that's, it's a good connection tool as well. So there's just kind of like, it's pretty simple from a surface level. It's just making sure that you're fully understanding who your target demographic is, what type of content they consume, where they consume it, how often, the frequency, are they going to come back for the content? and then you build it all around that. And that's basically what you do.
It does sound complicated to me. There's so many different, like you said, just going through the example there were so many different demographics and,
Yeah.
finding people at the right time, and that motivated seller, like there's such a small window typically that they're going to be searching for content. And so, and you're right, they're not going to be listening to your channel and subscribing to it and like listening to all of the different posts. There's going to be one post they see, right? It's going to
Yeah.
be enough to where they look at that person and be like, oh yeah, I would work with this person, right? They look trustworthy. They seem like they know what they're talking about. You're raising yourself up as, somebody who can, who's had some success in the past and knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I see that being difficult, but it seems to
Well,
me
you
like
got to
there's going to
remember,
be a few
Benson.
videos that get good at SEO, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe you publish 50 videos on that's like for motivated sellers, but
Yes,
like
that's the
three of
point.
them
That's
work
the point,
and
is
they
because
rise.
those are timeless, right? You're
Yeah.
going to be able to put it out there and it's going to do all the work for you. It's like a 24/7 salesperson or a lead manager that is out there for them. And of course, that's given the fact of you're building SEO for your website and building a web presence, of course, like that's going to be a big function of it. But, again, if the motivation happens at a time of the day, typically late at night or something like that, and they get immediate value from you before they ever hop on a phone call, even if the video is a year old, but it's still relevant and it answers their question, like it's a no-brainer. And the thing is too, is like just making sure you understand what you're doing it for in the first place. You're not putting, if you're specifically trying to attract motivated seller leads, your goal is not to get 25,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel. That's not the point of it. The point
Right.
of it is to bring you deals. So let's say, for instance, I use this example all the time because people, no matter how simple it is, people just, they don't get it. They always want the views, they want the subscribers. But listen, let's say, for example, and this is a very elementary example, you get 100 views on a video and it brings you one deal that's a $50,000 rip on a wholesale deal. Was it a successful video? If it got 10 views and it brought you one deal and you made 50 grand off of it, was it successful? 100% yes.
Right.
But let's flip it around. What if you got 100,000 views on the video and it brought you no deals, brought you a couple leads, but it didn't equate to a deal? Was it a successful video? On the
Right.
surface, you might say, yeah, I got 100,000 views. It was great, but it didn't achieve the objective that you set out for with that video. You were trying to get deals. That's the point there. Now, analytics like that are important. I don't want to discount the analytics side of it. But at the end of the day, it boils down to what I call as your North Star. What are you actually trying to get to with that piece of content? That's what you have to focus on. And the analytics are
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like checkpoints that help you get to that point, right? So if you're getting 100,000 views on your video and you're not getting leads through the door, my question would be, where's the call to action then? Are you giving
Right.
proper call to action and messaging in that content and leading them to the right place? Let's fix that, because obviously the video works, it's getting views, but it's not bringing leads to the door. What do we fix next within that funnel? And that's how you go from there.
Right. Yeah, those eyeballs are valuable, right? So
Yeah.
even if your intent was to get a deal to fix and flip or to wholesale, but it doesn't work, but you get 100,000 views, you might talk with your strategist, like Culler Media, and be like, we got all these views. How do we monetize them? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, okay, well, let's think about our strategy here. Like, yeah, we want to get some leads here and there, but you've got 100,000 people listening to you.
Yeah.
What else can you sell them? Right. Is there a course? Can you do affiliate sales where you're selling other people's products? Like those eyeballs are the valuable piece of it at the end of the day.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you see that happen sometimes where people thought they were doing one thing and they're like, oh man, I completely got this wrong. We need to do something completely different. Let's pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I always encourage with that is don't knee jerk though. Like don't try to pivot off of one piece of content going a direction that you didn't want it to go. Like you're always gonna have, something that you put out and it busts. But then the other
Right.
time you put it out, maybe it pops and it does extremely well. So the thing I always like to look at is at least 30 days worth of analytics and make decisions based off that data. So if I'm looking at, say, a client's YouTube channel and their videos are getting low view counts, and it's been 30 days. We publish, 2 videos a week. And so that's, 8 videos on a monthly basis. I'm going to go into each one of those videos, look at, okay, where were the retention rates? Where were the click-through rates? And I'm looking at that kind of data and then analyzing, well, if they were getting really good retention, so everybody was staying to watch the entirety of every video, but there was very few people that actually got presented the video and clicked on it. Well, that's a click-through rate problem. That means I need to adjust the title, or I need to adjust the thumbnail because it's not attracting the eyeball for people to click on it. But if you just do that with one video and you change the entire strategy, that's going to be really hard in the long run on your strategy, and it's going to wear out everybody in the process. It's going to wear out your video editor, your thumbnail designer. It's going to wear out you, because then you're going to be always questioning where you got to make adjustments on stuff. So
Mhm.
I just encourage people, like, again, as a real estate investor, if you send out a 20,000 piece mail drop to try to buy, houses from motivated seller leads, you're not looking at one mail piece and saying that didn't work. You're analyzing the entire drop and figuring out where the broken part was if it didn't bring the right leads in for you. And you need to do the
Right.
same thing with content. That goes for podcasting, that goes for social media, that goes for YouTube. It's just, you got to make sure that you put out enough as well. And a lot of this too, Benson, is just consistently doing it, and
Yeah.
just make sure the formula for success on these content platforms is, to me, it's consistency, it's quality, it's simplicity. Those are the 3 things that, like, as long as you can achieve those, and quality does include, like, the proper volume of putting out. You need to make sure you give yourself enough at bats. So if you're posting one podcast episode on a monthly basis, that's really not going to get you anywhere. It's going to be really hard to do anything with that. But like,
Right.
for instance, Benson said he's putting out 3 episodes a week. That's going to crush. Like, wait 2 to 3 months and you're gonna blast off, as long as you're doing your fundamentals correctly, putting out well SEO driven titles and show notes, and you're keeping the podcast highly engaging, that sort of thing. You're going to have no problem
Mhm.
growing the podcast, and do that for a year. And if, Benson, when you get to a year, then you can start complaining if you have any issues with the podcast not getting reached. But
Right.
until you reach that year, no excuses. You put out 3 episodes a week and you just do it as best you can. But people just a lot of times don't give enough time to view the analytics and make actual good decisions on this kind of stuff. And that's what you need to do. So
Right. So you mentioned the top 3 things, and but earlier you mentioned, the call to action, and the call to action is kind of tricky when you're
yeah.
doing social media because they're coming to you for entertainment mostly, right? They want to like do something with their time and they're swiping and they're looking at their phone and they come across your video, maybe they like your stuff, and then the CTA comes, right? So you're like,
Yeah.
like and follow or go to this link. What are some effective strategies for the call to action where you can really take those eyeballs and really monetize them?
Again, it all comes down to the conversation of, what is your North Star? What are you trying to accomplish? So, for example, if your primary goal with the podcast is to grow the podcast because you have a objective beyond the podcast, then I would leverage every bit of content that you put on social media, on YouTube, to go subscribe to the podcast. Or if it's for YouTube, you want to grow the YouTube channel because you believe there's a lot of value in doing that, I would be chopping out clips that you post on social media 2 to 3 times a day. And then the call to action is going to be, go subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. It wouldn't be, to me, if you put out an Instagram video, to me, it wouldn't be follow me on Instagram for more content like this. It would be, click the link on my bio to go subscribe to my YouTube channel for the full video. That's what it would
Right.
be, because your objective is YouTube. Your
Mm.
objective is not to grow the Instagram account. Now, everybody that you talk to that's an influencer has kind of different opinions when it comes to this stuff. But, again, of course, a lot of it is based on the context of the videos, who your demographic is. For the most part, yeah, a lot of people are coming for entertainment, but, like a lot of people that are watching videos, especially like educational type content or informational type content, like what a real estate investor would put out, um, they're coming there to feel like they are learning something, and that's why they're watching the video. That's what the viewer's doing. And if their appetite for more is met by the video that you just put out, sure, they'll go subscribe to your content. Or at minimum, they'll follow your Instagram because they really like the video that they just saw. and then at some point maybe they'll go subscribe to your YouTube channel. So it's just kind of like there's different functions to it. So the call to action is always going to be, what is my North Star? What am I trying to accomplish? If your North Star is leveraging all these platforms and putting content out because you want to drive people to a specific funnel, let's say you have a webinar that you're promoting, or you have a live event that it's coming up, I'd be putting the podcast, pre-roll ad, mid-roll ad, post-roll ad. All three would be, make sure you go check out josh'sevent.com, because we're, trying to get signups at this point for this event that we're putting on. And that's what I'd be driving towards. Every Instagram post, the call to action would be, if you're interested in X, Y, and Z, and you're this person, go sign up for my event. Link is in the bio. YouTube channel, no different. That's what I'd be driving towards. So where it can seem complex, the call to action should be whatever you're trying to accomplish at the given moment. Now, some people, the objective is to truly grow a presence on multiple platforms. Then at that point, Instagram video, like and follow for more. TikTok video, like and follow for more. YouTube channel, like, share, and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Podcast, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Go leave a 5-star review. So it's just all based on what your objective is, and that's what you have to center the call to actions around.
Right. So there certainly are lots of moving parts and different levers to pull to make sure you're getting the proper outcome. And I like that. Like, what's your North Star? Like, what are you really trying to accomplish? And, for people listening to this, that is something that sometimes is difficult to figure out. So having somebody like Josh advise you, I think, is something that makes a lot of sense, instead of just, starting and trying to figure out along the way and making mistakes and, honestly just wasting a bunch of time. Um, so Josh, we're coming up toward the end of the podcast here, and you got your hands in a lot of different things, which is really cool. Tell me about the Hope and Strength Project. It's one of your passion projects, something that you've started. What is the Hope and Strength Project all about?
Yeah, so I actually don't run that anymore, but it kind of rolled over into
Mm.
something else that we're, it's primarily me and my wife that are working on, but it started off, gosh, that would have been 2015, I believe, was the first year that we did it. And we did it for
Mm-hmm.
about 5 or 6 years. And basically it was just um we during the Christmas holidays, a lot of times people that, need things, maybe they're like poor or they're homeless, or there was a couple families that we had taken care of over the years. Typically we choose about 3 or 4 families that we just spoil because tragedy struck them around the holiday season or sometime earlier that year.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, a couple families where they lost a parent, and or there was one family that lost both parents, and there was 4 kids. They're living with grandma now, and grandma's struggling because she lived by herself, but nobody else can take the kids. So we would just spoil them. We would raise money and then spoil those kids and the grandmother as well, and that sort of thing. And then we would typically go up to Chicago, because there's thousands of homeless people all over Chicago, and we'd drop off care packages to them. And I'm a born again Christian, and so we would also like witness to them and talk to them about Christ and church and that sort of thing. Invite them to the church that I'm going to. And so that's kind of like what we did, and that lasted for about 6 years. And then I kind of rolled that over. We still do that to a degree. It's just not at the scale that it was, because I kind of wanted to personalize that to, not in a selfish way, but to me and my wife and then my immediate family. But then in 2019, I took on my first missionary that we support. So there's an organization called Core Missions that is ran by a very good friend of mine. And I have a heart for missions because my mother was adopted in El Salvador by missionaries.
Oh, wow.
And that was when she was extremely young. I don't even think she was a year old when she got adopted. Then they brought her to States. And so my grandparents that adopted her have been missionaries for, I think, 60 plus years or something like that. And so
Wow.
they're in that. And they live in the States now. I think my grandfather is a director of like the Central and South America divisions of the organization they work with. But that's a very near and dear thing to my heart. And so we support missionaries on a monthly basis that are around the world and that sort of thing. And that's kind of what that's developed into. So still, like, I try to like make sure that whatever I'm giving to is in alignment with something that's a part of my heart, to make sure that I'm going after. The reason I started the Hope and Strength Project in the first place was because my mom had breast cancer, where it was really, really bad when I was in 6th grade. And we had a couple of Christmases that were just awful Christmases, because every dime was going towards paying for her care and
Mm.
making sure that, she was taking care of that sort of thing, which is understandable. And at the time, it wasn't really something we thought about, but I do remember those Christmases very thoroughly. And I specifically, not that this is like a pity on me story, but this is one of the reasons why we stepped in to do it, was because I remember those 2 Christmases that there was very few people that jumped in to try to help us in any way, shape, or form. And we went to a very large church where there was, 15,000 people at the church and that sort of thing. And it's just, I went to a pretty big school, had a lot of friends, and just very few people reached out to kind of try to help support us. And so that's where kind of like the motivation of the Hope and Strength Project kind of came in. So that's what we were doing. But
that's amazing. Does the new evolution of that project, does it have a name or some place where people can find it?
No, it's just something that we're doing on our own. It's just me and my wife at the moment that we're kind of like doing that. So
Cool.
Kind of under the radar. I talk about it. Like, I'm more than happy to talk about it, but it's just something we just don't really, I would say, make public. So.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people will start, organizations, nonprofits, because they need the outside help to fund it. Right. And, if it's something that you guys can do in-house, and it doesn't have to be millions of dollars, it could be, hundreds or thousands of dollars for anybody who's listening, right? Like, it's just, you just have to make a commitment to either donating, a certain amount of money or time to helping people. And it doesn't have to be some grand thing for it to make an impact.
Right.
If you can just change the life or impact one person's life, it's worth it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. So, for anybody who's interested in maybe, getting involved in the social media game or leveling up the game that they're currently doing or having a better strategy, how can people find you?
Yeah, so at the time of this recording, our website is currently under construction, where we retooled at the end of the year and going into the beginning of this year. We retooled a lot of our services to be a little bit more hands-on than what they currently have been. So we're rebuilding the website based off of the new services basically that we've rebuilt and that sort of thing. So don't go to my website. You could go there and it's up right now, but it's not fully where we want it to be. But you can, if you're listening to this podcast, you could personally reach out to me and I can either give my email, my Instagram handle, or whatever. If you just go to any social media platform and look for Josh Culler, Culler, you'll find me there, and you can send me a direct message. That would honestly probably be the best way to reach out to me. And anybody that's listening, I'm more than happy to hop on a call if needed to, or answer any questions that anybody has about anything that I talked about, social media or whatever it is. And, kind of give that offering to your listeners. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I know you're really busy and you got a lot of things that you're working on. But thanks for taking the time just to kind of share your experiences and your past. And I mean, you're only 30 and you've lived 10 lives already. And so I know it's going to be an inspiration for people, and maybe we'll have you back on down the line when you got something, exciting to share or to talk about. But thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on. I'm always happy to be back on if needed. And then once I start my podcast back up, I will get you back on the show to rediscuss some things that we need to catch up on. So we'll make that happen.
Love it. Awesome, buddy. Well, have a great day. Everybody, thank you so much. Please follow us, check us out on our different distribution platforms. We're going to have lots of really amazing content coming to you. Like Josh said, we're going to be publishing a lot more content more frequently. And, you can find little snippets of it on the socials. So follow me on Benson REI on Instagram and on TikTok. And also you can find me on YouTube as well. Lots of real estate investing tips and tricks and really great stories from people like Josh. So please follow us. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker Podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.